everyone, welcome to the Sweeney Show, Business Law Podcast. My name is David Sweeney and joining me here today is Margaret Barrett of Bank of Ireland. Margaret, you're very welcome.
Thanks, David. Thanks a million for asking me to join.
No, not at all. It's my pleasure. So you were a senior BAW advisor. What exactly is that role?
Yeah, so my role is in Bank of Ireland, obviously. I'm a senior bank at work advisor, which is a really super role. David, I love it. So I cover all banking requirements from day-to-day banking, savings, any borrowing requirements, I suppose, including mortgages, any protection requirements that our clients may have, so on and so forth.
Great, yeah. So look, I'd like to focus on today because I know we've actually met each other before and we've discussed mortgages and first-time buyers in the market and maybe people who might be out there switching a mortgage. That's something that you've come across. That's your day-to-day job?
Absolutely. So I suppose 80% of my job probably accounts for mortgages. You know, I suppose we go to companies and we'll say a scheduled on-site visit, and predominantly people want to speak about mortgages. So I suppose that's my forte.
Yeah, and that because since I think COVID has come in, have you gone? I know that are you working from home at the moment, or are you in the office, or?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I suppose like many of our customers, we entered the working from home model fairly abruptly in March. But we adapted really, really fast and remained 100% available to all our customers, David. I suppose what we offer with our Bank at Work channel in Bank of Ireland is we offer, I suppose, a scheduled on-site visit to the companies, and in turn we come and visit their offices to meet their employees at, I suppose, at a place and a time that's convenient to them. So I suppose that was turned on its head on COVID. So now we offer a very virtual model, and I suppose our meetings with our one-to-one clients are either by phone or by FaceTime. And we're now hosting a number of webinars with our companies. And I suppose look like that and everything. The most important and most popular one is mortgages. But I suppose look, we're here to support our customers throughout these really unprecedented times, David. Yeah,
and I suppose is the concept then of Bank at Work is that you identify maybe large companies that have a demographic of people that might be out there looking to get on the property market, and to save them time and the inconvenience of having to go into a bank or a broker, you actually would go out to reach out to the company itself and arrange now webinars to give them information?
Absolutely. And it's a super service for any company. So we're probably in most of the large multinationals in Cork City, and for any company that has, let's say, over 50 employees, we offer this service. It's free of charge. We offer a dedicated online portal on the Bank of Ireland website for companies and their employees to book a one-on-one appointment. And as I say, the webinars we do scheduled once a month, and they've been great. So like I suppose all our customers really, David, are like ourselves. We're all working from a home model now, so our life is fairly virtual at the moment, but it's great. It's working out, and we've remained really, really busy throughout COVID, especially around mortgages.
Sure, yeah, and I've noticed that myself. The residential market seems to be quite buoyant. In particular, obviously the construction side stopped working in COVID-1 back in the March-April time period. But since the back to work, I know we're in another lockdown, COVID-2, or just coming out of it, but it seems that the residential market got a huge lift, got a buoyancy after COVID-1 has continued. Is that something you've noticed in the bank?
Absolutely. I suppose when we first went into the first lockdown, there was definitely a level of uncertainty of what the property market would look like post-lockdown. But I suppose a few interesting things happened. We remained really, really busy with say, new mortgage applications and new mortgage approvals. And interestingly enough, the CSO released a property price index for September just in November. And it has a few interesting points to note, David. I suppose for property prices for new dwelling houses, they were actually 1.7% higher in Q3 2020 compared to the same quarter in 2019. Now, existing dwelling houses actually decreased by 1.6%, so that will tell you where the appetite is at. Dublin, of course, is starting to flatten, as we know at the moment from a property perspective, and prices fell there at 1.8%. But interestingly enough, in our own little patch down here in the southwest in Cork City, we know it's buoyant, and property prices increased by 3.9%. So it's probably down to a level, David, of a supply and demand out of kilter perspective. But we've remained really, really busy. And only this Tuesday, interestingly enough as well, the banking and Payments Federation launched a report as well, and they stated that in October 2020, it was the busiest month in mortgage approvals since 2011.
Wow.
So there's huge appetite in the market at the moment, and we're seeing that here at Bank of Ireland in our mortgage applications and mortgage approvals to date. I suppose first-time buyers are still predominantly the most popular mortgage application that will come across our desk, and according to the Banking and Payments Federation, they accounted for over 60% in October.
What's the usual demographic of a first-time buyer now? What's the age or profile of them, do you think, in general terms?
I would say probably early 30s is where they're at. You know,
usually a couple.
Full-time. Yeah, well, yes, I suppose predominantly so, but we do have sole applications. Sure. Yeah. Also as well, but predominantly, yes, a couple, you know, not necessarily cohabiting at time of purchase either, you know. I suppose another demographic is that they're probably in the rental market, and we know that rental prices are quite high at the moment, and we see that especially in Cork City.
And what then, if someone is looking at their salary and you see these mortgage calculators, what's the lending criteria? How does someone figure out, they're out some sunny afternoon for a drive and they see a housing development and they go, wow, I'd really love to live here and move here, but then they go and do the finances. Is there any way they can actually work it out themselves before they make an application of can they actually afford a house?
Well, look, absolutely. There's, like all banking, or all banks will have calculators on their website. Yeah. But my advice, David, is reach out to an advisor as early on in the journey as possible, because we're here to guide you and we're here to do the initial assessment, and we'll tell you point in time where you're at with regards to the Central Bank of Ireland macroprudential rules. And I suppose they haven't changed in 2020. So for a first-time buyer, the loan to value is 90%. For a mover, it's 80%. Holiday homes and investment properties still remains at 70%, and we're still lending to 3.5 times the gross combined income. So they haven't changed. But I suppose from a client's perspective, and they're wondering, can I get that a house? Do I sit inside criteria? Reach out to us. I personally, David, love speaking to customers when they're 6, 12, 18, 24 months out from buying a house, for the simple reason, if there's any fine tuning to be done to a mortgage application at that time, we have time.
Yeah. When you say the fine tuning, what is someone that you want to prepare to apply for a mortgage? What are things or tips that they should be getting in place?
Yeah, so look, I suppose talk to us first of all is number one, absolutely number one. And at Bank of Ireland, we offer a fully underwritten credit letter of offer for house hunters, and that stays valid for 12 months. So that's really important in the current market, because what clients will find, David, they'll walk into an estate agent or an auctioneer, and the very first question they'll be asked is, have you approval from a bank in place? So really, really important to engage with us. From an assessment point of view, look, if you're in the mortgage, if you're planning on getting on the property ladder in the next 6 to 12 months' time, you know, there's a few things that you can do, first of all, right, okay? Look, I suppose, first of all, you have to demonstrate that you can pay the mortgage amount, and that's probably number one in a mortgage assessment, and very, very important, right, okay? We need to ensure that we can lend this money responsibly, and that you can afford it and it's comfortable. So demonstrated repayment ability is really, really important. Use your accounts, your current accounts, to demonstrate all transactions. So sometimes we see people that are coming in for an assessment and they're living in a house share, but they're paying their element of their rent in cash. It's like it doesn't happen from a bank's perspective. So ensure that it's going through your account, and ensure that your savings are going through your account, and that we can see everything through your current accounts. So really, really important to get you know, that perspective. I suppose for any lending that you have, that it's up to date, it's inside the terms and conditions. From a savings perspective, ensure that you're saving monthly, and I suppose that it's staying inside in the account, that there's no erratic withdrawals. I suppose you need to be in full-time employment, and probation certainly needs to be completed from a drawdown perspective, but we're happy to assess fixed-term contracts also, David, from that perspective. You know, you have to have funding. So there's elements there. That funding can come from different places. So if you're a first-time buyer, you're entitled to qualify for the Help to Buy scheme. So investigate that as early on in the process as possible. But I suppose, number one, David, reach out and speak to us. It costs nothing to speak.
So if someone goes ahead and they're successful in their application, and then the property they had their eye on falls through for whatever reason, is that loan offer, is that valid for a period of time, or do they have to reapply, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so if they're approved on a house hunter mortgage application with Bank of Ireland, it is fully underwritten, and we normally approve them for the max that they sit inside criteria. So that stays valid for 12 months, regardless if if the property falls through or not. Once a property is identified, we will change that letter of offer into a legal contract, which is called a full letter of offer. But again, that can be amended or changed down the line if required.
What information does someone need to get to you beforehand? Do they need their pay slips? Do they need proof of ID? What's the kind of information they should be collating now?
Absolutely. So I suppose once the initial assessment has taken place, David, and we know the applicants are inside the borrowing criteria, it's absolutely very, very straightforward from that perspective. So for Bank of Ireland mortgage applications, we require a Bank of Ireland salary search to be completed by the employer or the HR department. We look for 2 months pay slips that will correspond to that salary search. If we're using any variable pay, so like the likes of bonuses or anything like that, we will require some P60s, now known as the employee benefit statements, to confirm the average bonus over the past 3 years. And we take that into consideration also for lending at Bank of Ireland. We will require, I suppose the best way to describe it, for any banking that's held outside of Bank of Ireland, we're going to look for bank statements on. So normally 6 months current account statements, 12 months savings statements, and I suppose in this day and age we look for Revolut and N26 statements as well.
Okay.
I suppose we need to identify our customers, so we look for proof of address and proof of ID. Yeah. That's very, very straightforward. And I suppose for clients that are self-employed, we look for 2 years sets of accounts, audited if necessary, but also any revenue documents to back up the income. So it's very, very straightforward, David, to be totally honest. Like, obviously we have to demonstrate that the funding is available, and that's, that can be a struggle in this day and age with rental markets or rental prices being so expensive. But again, if they are using the Help to Buy scheme, they can print off their revenue documents and demonstrate that. If they're in receipt of a gift, we'll get a gift letter completed, so on and so forth. It's very, very straightforward. How
is COVID? What's the practical implications of the COVID? Say people were out on furlough or went on a COVID payment, and they had been saving all along, and they intended to buy a house. And now maybe they're back at work, or they're now working remotely, or maybe they're still out on the COVID. What implications has that on a mortgage application?
So it does have some level of impact. We will absolutely assess every application that will come across our desk. If it has COVID on it, we will still assess it. But I suppose for mortgage drawdown, David, we probably will need to see their salary regularised back to what it originally was, and that's to ensure we're lending responsibly, but also that the clients can take on the financial commitment, because as we know, a mortgage is a long-term commitment on their behalf.
Yeah, and where do you see the property market? Do you see it continuing into next year? The same buoyancy? Do you think demand is still there?
Absolutely, and I suppose I speak for maybe Cork City is probably the market I'm most familiar with. Absolutely, David. We're still, the amount of house hunter mortgage applications that we receive daily in Bank of Ireland is significant. So there's huge appetite there at the moment. We know that there's a lot of new builds happening in Cork City at the moment in Cork County, and that's really, really positive. But there's plenty of people to buy that. Now, I guess probably what has changed since COVID is that our customers are now working from home, and that will broaden their search of the ideal property. Look, if you're working in the city, you no longer possibly need to live in the city to commute and so on and so forth. So that will probably have an impact, but I would see that as a positive impact, actually.
Yeah. What if somebody had a loan many years ago and had an issue with a repayment, and maybe they have a reflection on the Irish Credit Bureau? How does that affect a current mortgage application? Does that come into it?
It does, absolutely. Look, if we're going to see something on the Irish Credit Bureau, we're going to see it, and it stays there, as we know, for at least 5 years. But once, I suppose, look, we have people that have come out of maybe personal insolvency, and once they're out of personal insolvency for 2 years, then we're absolutely, they're entitled, first of all, to restart, and we absolutely will underwrite that. Once we can show that the client is now sitting inside all criteria, has the net disposable income monthly, has the demonstrated repayment ability, is in long-term secure employment, has the funding, then absolutely we have mitigating facts to underwrite that mortgage.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot out there at the moment with new banks and mortgage companies coming into the market, and there's a lot of talk about switching mortgage and remortgaging. What's involved in a switcher mortgage or a remortgage?
It is so easy. It is, absolutely. I think there's a myth that it's actually really, really difficult, and there's a lot of work involved in it, David. It actually amazes me that we don't do a lot more of the switching of mortgages in Ireland as a nation. Interestingly enough, the Central Bank of Ireland have stated that a mere 3% of mortgages switched in H2 2019. The financial savings that can be made in switching a mortgage, David, is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So the best way I can describe this is a recent example of a mortgage I switched to Bank of Ireland very, very recently. The mortgage, was 295,000, which is a sizable mortgage, but the interest rate they were on was 3.15%. And that's, not the most expensive interest rate that some of our customers are on. The client, by switching to Bank of Ireland, David, just on the switching of the rate alone from 3.15 to our fixed interest rate, which is 2.9%, on the monthly direct debit savings they were making on their repayments, was able to shave a full 12 months off their term. So it reduced the term from 26 to 25, and that's just on rate alone. Obviously, the reason they switched to Bank of Ireland is because we have a super cashback offer. So they will receive 2% cashback within 45 working days of drawing down that mortgage, and on this particular mortgage, that equates to 5,900. They have a Bank of Ireland current account, so they will also receive 1% on the 5th anniversary. So that's 2,950 in the 5th anniversary. That's a total cashback of 8,850 that they're going to see in their bank account, touching and feeling it and spending it as they like. David, I think as a nation, we switch utility providers really, really easily in Ireland. I know personally I switch, and all I'm trying to do is save money, but I'm saving maybe 100, maybe 200 euros. But by switching a mortgage, you're saving absolute thousands. It's really, really straightforward. Now, there is a cost, as you know, in switching a mortgage, because you have to appoint a solicitor. And you know this because you do this all the time. The cost to appoint a solicitor is around 1,500 euros, I believe, for the solicitor to carry out all the legal duties. For this client, after all costs, they were still up 7,000 euros and a year off the term. So it's definitely worth having a conversation with Bank of Ireland. It is an application. It is a mortgage application that has to be completed. So the client does have to gather documentation for us. But David, the best way to describe this is that if I told you that it will take you 2 hours of your time to gather the documentation, and I give you 7,000 euros for the hardship of it, I'm telling you, you'd be laughing all the way to the bank. You see as a bun.
Yeah, I think there's something in the Irish psyche, though, is there, that once they kind of have their mortgage, that's it. There is a reluctance to people to change.
I think people think it's a huge process when in fact it's not. Yeah. In theory, we can switch a mortgage in about 4 to 6 weeks. So absolutely, you have to gather documentation, but most of our documentation is online. All our financial statements are online. So it's not that hardship, that you have to go to the bank to get the bank statements. Everything is online. So you gather it up, you complete your mortgage application. We have to ensure, obviously, that it sits inside assessment criteria. But once that's done, we have measures in place that we can do it very, very quickly. As a solicitor, David, you will request the title deeds on trust. So that's done. That's often probably the slowest part of the switch. And from there, we enter into on approval, we issue, I suppose, a letter of offer, and we enter the completion stages where we're just trying to get the switch to happen. So it's very, very straightforward.
And if we jump back to kind of the first time buyer buying the house, that drawdown process, is there much loops and jumps that a first time buyer must go to before they actually can draw down their loan?
Not at all. So I suppose the longest part of the mortgage journey is gathering of documentation and getting the approval in place. So once we have that, we issue the full letter of offer. On a property-specific mortgage application, that letter of offer is issued to our client, and a solicitor's pack is issued to their solicitor. And I suppose the solicitor will do a lot of the work in the background, really, David, to be totally honest. Once the solicitor receives the letter of offer, they'll check the letter of offer to make sure all the conditions can be satisfied, and then we move into completion stage. So we require a valuation to be done on the property, and I suppose the valuer has to be on the bank's panel to carry out the valuation. Once the valuation is done, we get a home insurance policy in place on the property and mortgage protection. So that's pretty much the bank side of it. From the solicitor's side of it, you'll know this better than I will. There's exchanging of contracts, there's title deed searches, so on and so forth. Once the solicitor sends in the check requisition to Bank of Ireland, we have a full completions team in place to carry that through. I suppose currently, from the day of check requisition receipt to check issue is taking about 5 working days. So it's fairly straightforward, David.
Yeah, it is. And I suppose it's all about being prepared, isn't it? Having all our ducks in a row and getting the information ready.
And that's what we're here for. And I suppose Bank of Ireland, for, I suppose the services that we offer, including to our Bank at Work employees, but across our branch network also, we're here to guide our customers. We absolutely appreciate that the mortgage journey is somewhat of a roller coaster. But we do this every day. So we're here to guide you. I have a case manager that is helping me with my pipeline to push out the mortgage applications to drawdown. We have a completions team in place and obviously our underwriting team. So we have a full team to make it as seamless as possible. We have good relationships with most solicitors in Cork City and across Ireland. So look, everyone is working to get it done as fast as possible.
Margaret, listen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been very, very interesting. What's the plans for yourself for the future and for the bank?
Yeah, so after the year we've had, that's an interesting one. So I suppose Bank of Ireland, our purpose statement is to enable our customers, colleagues and communities to thrive. And I suppose I look forward to doing my small bit to ensure that that's delivered in Cork City in 2021. I suppose if COVID has taught us anything, David, is that we have the ability to adapt really, really fast when we need to. And we can implement change at a precedented rate, to be totally honest. So I look forward to what the new normal looks like in 2021. As a bank, we're adapting at pace also to ensure that we're a leading digital relationship bank. And I'm sure this transformation will absolutely ensure that we enable our customers, colleagues and communities.
And if anybody was starting out on their property journey, mortgage journey, or anyone wants to switch mortgage, how would they reach out to you? How do they get in touch?
Yeah, so they'll find me on LinkedIn. First of all, I suppose it's nearly the easiest place to find me. But my email address is margaret.barrett@boi.com. So absolutely, David, would love to speak to anyone that is hoping to buy a property in the next, as I say, 12 to 24 months. I'm here to help. It's no obligation, but take the advice that we'll give you. And I'm sure they'll choose Bank of Ireland as a mortgage partner.
Well, Margaret, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been very interesting, insightful, and we wish you all the very best for the future.
David, thanks a million. Really appreciate the support.